Hello and welcome to the GYIP Connect podcast. I'm Jack Chambers.
I'm Sam McCann.
And I'm John Aitken.
Today in the podcast we're joined by the youngest ever First Minister of Scotland, as well as the only Muslim and Scottish Asian to hold the title since the Scottish Parliament birth in 1999. Welcome to the podcast, Humza Yousaf.
Great pleasure to be here.
Humza, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm very well. Other than loaded with a cold, my 1-year-old has managed to infect me. But other than that, I'm very well. So thanks so much for inviting me on. It's always a pleasure, given how much I love GYIP and the wonderful work that you've done over the years.
So, Humza, we've known you 10 years. Obviously, we'll not say your name right for those 10 years. But we know you for politics and we know you for what you do in the area. But give us a wee bit about yourself. Where did you grow up? Your parents, things like that?
Yeah, well, look, I'm just so happy to be here because I've known you, although I've known you as the kind of local MSP, I got elected to this particular seat in 2016. Before that, I was elected to the wider kind of Glasgow area in 2011. I've been blown away by the work that GYIP has done. And, I'm not just saying that because I'm sitting here in your podcast. I've said it to you many times in private. Governing such a wonderfully diverse community. But it's also got its challenges like any other community. And the fact that there's a place for young people of all backgrounds to come, a safe space, is wonderful. And I know how committed you and the rest of the staff team have been to the young people that you serve. So a real pleasure for me, first of all, to be here. Look, my own background, I'm really proud to be the son of immigrants. My grandparents, both maternal and paternal, came from Pakistan, although my mum was born in Kenya, so a lot of Asians moved to East Africa, but they went to Pakistan and then came here. So South Asian parents and grandparents came here in the 1960s. Both my parents went to Houston Academy, which is not too far away from here on the south side.
Sam's School.
My old school.
Sam's School. So I'm pleased to say they're still producing exceptional people.
See?
No fit his head to the door.
So went to Houston Academy. Again, kind of somewhat typical story of immigrants. They worked really hard, they grafted really hard. My dad became the first one in his family to go to university, became an accountant. He's now 72, still working 6 days a week. Not that I'm proud of that or pleased about that. I have to say I'm proud to a point, but I have been telling him to retire for about the last 10 years. And my mum worked in various different jobs, but most recently in housing, but also she now volunteers as a chaplain as well. I grew up really very blessed. I grew up born in Pollokshields, then moved over to Newton Mearns. High school, kind of typical, and I better just get this out of the way on the podcast straight away. Massive Celtic fan. So grew up as a young boy watching football, following the football, playing football. And then, to be honest, what really sparked my journey into politics, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but it was really that moment of 9/11, which was a horrendous moment. Terrible terror attack that took place in New York, 9/11. And I'd only ever viewed myself really as Scottish. Of course, I knew I was Muslim, but it never really came up in conversation much. I used to wear fancy clothes on Eid and all that, but nothing really significant beyond that. But the day after 9/11 happened, a lot of people that I was very close to, very close friends of mine, started questioning me about things I had no idea. Why do Muslims hate America? Why did they fly the planes into the Twin Towers? Do you know who did it? And then I started watching the news, and from there, got interested in politics, studied politics, and as I suppose they say, the rest is history. And I'm sure again we'll kind of get into that. So look, my upbringing, I was really blessed. Wonderful family home, parents, family, cousins, great, wonderful childhood. Yes, some racism in there. Yes, some Islamophobia, especially as I got older. But I was really lucky, and this is not everybody's experience, but I was lucky to just be surrounded by love.
Were your family or anybody in your family, were they interested in politics? Or?
Yeah, do you know they were? My dad actually was the first non-white member of the SNP in Glasgow when he joined in the 1970s, which was exceptional because back then there was a lot of disinformation told about the SNP. So they would say, like, why are you joining the SNP? That's like a far-right party. Mm-hmm. My dad would say, no, they're not. My dad actually, funnily enough, he actually thought Scotland was already independent when he arrived in this country. He didn't know it belonged as part of the UK. And then when he found out, he was like, this is dreadful. I think we should be independent. So my dad actually joined the SNP in the 1970s. My mum I don't think she ever joined the Labour Party, but she was very supportive of the Labour Party. So you'd have this funny situation in my household sometimes when it was election time. Like my dad would have the upstairs window with the SNP poster. My mum would have like a downstairs window with the Labour poster. But each to their own. And mum then left the Labour Party because of the Iraq War. In 2003, like a lot of people, I did not like Tony Blair, and she left at that moment in time. So the household was quite political, but never frontline politics. Dad never stood, mum never stood for election, and I was always expected, because I was fairly good at kind of English and social subjects, less so at kind of sciences and things. There's always thought I'd be a lawyer, but I decided to pursue politics, and I got the blessing from my parents to do so, and I'm very grateful to them for it.
You said your dad, or there was misinformation about it being that kind of far right party. Is that because of the national word in the middle?
Exactly.
Because I remember like ANP and SNP were always quite similarly linked name wise, and I wasn't sure of why is that national word in there, but obviously as you grow up and you learn a wee bit more about it, you realise that. But that's interesting. You said that's something I've thought before.
Yeah, nail on the head. The word national has got really negative connotations, and the reason why it's the Scottish National Party is we're the national party of the entire country, or we certainly try to be. And I've said this before, actually, quite publicly. Look, if I could go back in time and convince the founding members of the party to change the name to maybe Scotland's Party or something else, I probably would do that, because the connotations are so negative. I think people now know the SNP, but when we first came into government in 2007, the amount of people I'd meet from overseas would say, "You're part of a national party? Like, are they not trying to get rid of you a lot?" I'm like, no, different type of national.
Yeah.
We're not blood and soil kind of nationalists. We're what we call civic nationalists. So you're right. It caused a problem for my dad. Probably causes less of a problem now. People know the SNP, and obviously people look like me and sound like me have been leaders of the party. So it's probably kind of detoxified that word. But yeah, if I could go back in time, kind of 90 plus years, I'd probably say to our founders, can we maybe just think of a different name.
On you talking about John with the topic of wanting to get into politics and stuff, who was your biggest influence as you began to enter into politics?
That's a great question, you know. So quite a few people, look, I would say genuinely, my mum has been a massive influence, although my dad was the more political. My mum was definitely the one who taught us more about standing up for ourselves and being proud of who we are. My mum's, in some respects, got a bit of fame herself. So my mum took an estate agent to court, quite famously in the 90s, because when we wanted to move to house in Newton Mearns, or Crookford was the neighbourhood, she was denied the viewing of the house because she was told, look, the person who owns the house is away on holiday. Let's try the next week and the next week. How long does somebody go on bloody holiday for? It's 4 weeks on. And my mum just knew in her gut something wasn't right. So she got my dad to get his secretary, who was a white Scottish woman, to phone up. And she got an appointment like that, straight away. The day after, the same day, my mum got denied. And they tested it 2 or 3 times, and the same thing happened. Asian person phoned, no thank you. White person phoned, yeah, sure, we've got an appointment for you tomorrow, the next day. So mum then took him to court and eventually won on appeal, and the estate agent went bankrupt. And that was my mum saying, because I remember asking her, like, why did you go ahead with it? Because you had had a load of folk against you. A lot of hate mail, I remember, coming through the door. Even people in our own community were saying, just let it go. It's a lot of hassle. But she was like, no, if I roll over today, then they'll do the same to my kids. So mum was a huge influence in terms of kind of social justice, standing up for yourself. In terms of political role models, lots, I would say. I mean, for me, one of the first biographies I ever read, and that sucked me into kind of the movement for justice and social justice, was Malcolm X. It was a big, interesting figure that I really was fascinated by when I was younger. People like Nelson Mandela, who, you know, we've got Nelson Mandela Place, again, not too far away from where we're seated. I grew up listening to, watching. And then there was even people that were not in my political party, but you know, if I think about people like Robin Cook, he passed away, he was a former Foreign Secretary, he was a Labour Party MP, and he took a very strong stance. He resigned his seat in government because of the Iraq War. He didn't agree with it. He made this, I think today, actually, probably to date, the best resignation speech in the House of Commons. So I've got lots of people that I've looked up to and admired in my own party, you know, Nicola, and look, even Alex, although Alex and I had our differences towards the end of his life, politically, he was the one that first got me into the SNP, really. So lots of people, I think, across the political spectrum that I admire.
See, just going back a wee bit, you said about your mum kind of sticking up for herself against the estate agent, and you've done that kind of now famous speech, and Anna's done something similar, and that's had a lot of blowback. How has that been? Like, obviously, because they use it against you as if like you're almost a racist in that.
Yeah, yeah, they say that all the time. Look, it's probably the speech, and I've done thousands of speeches over the course of being a politician for almost 15 years, and it is the speech that garners the most backlash because it's so misinterpreted. I remember the context of it was in the midst of the Black Lives Matter movement. You know, a man, George Floyd, really killed by a police officer through having his artery cut off, really. Well, not able to breathe. And there we were, as Anas and I, you know, two ethnic minorities in that parliament, trying to make the point, and you can argue about language and phraseology and all that, but making the point that in far too many senior positions in Scottish public life, people like us aren't represented. And of course the country's, 96% white. That doesn't mean that 100% of the top senior roles can't be diverse, have to be the same looking person. And that's the point we're trying to make. And so to have that flipped by, and it's always flipped, by the way, by far-right racists, it's probably the speech that made me feel the most unsafe, because it globally got people sending me, my wife, and my family death threats, to the point where I had to have conversations with my young daughter. She's my eldest, actually, but at that point was just going into high school. And she wasn't actually, she wasn't even in high school. And having to say things to her like, just be careful about when you're walking back from school and to the bus stop and stuff, and just, if you think anything worries you, just find somebody that you can go speak to, or an adult, and that's not a nice conversation to have. And as she got older, and I got more of this when I became First Minister, and she was 14 at the time, having to talk her through, we had to get a safe room installed in the house, and saying to her, look, this is how you lock yourself in, go get your little sister, this is what you do with the door, this is the panic button. It's not really normal conversations. Kids, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this, but it's the one thing I say about politics is it is, particularly in the day and age of social media, the amount of abuse you will get, especially if you're a certain issues, race being one of them. Then I'm afraid that's probably what's putting a lot of people.
It's putting people off actually standing
for sure, 100%. Especially women, I have to say. Especially ethnic minorities. I think for a moment. Again, I'm not asking what your opinion is on this issue. Imagine you're a young trans person. Could you imagine you got elected and what the press would be like for you?
Yeah.
And what the opposition would say, and what J.K. Rowling would say about you, and what all these other people would say about you, and your entry into politics, and assume things about you, and basically a lot of people, particularly on that kind of far right spectrum, and I'm not saying, of course, J.K. Rowling's there at all, but for those certain people, would begin to put a target in your back because of who you are. So I think for a lot of people, particularly minorities. And women are not a minority, they're a majority. And for women, there's a lot of trepidation of even thinking about going into politics.
And how do we stop then the kind of misinformation that's out there? Because we know we'll have conversations with Jack and his peers, and even us in the office, like the amount of misinformation that people are believing. I mean, my wife will tell me something that she's seen on TikTok. Stop using certain sun cream because TikTok said it's bad for you, and like, how do we control that? Because it's everywhere.
Listen, your wife and my wife must be in the same TikTok accounts, because she said that to me recently as well. So two things I would say. One is, and you guys are a living, breathing example of this through this podcast, is the people that are trying to bring proper information, accurate information. We have to be in the spaces where other people are. So politicians still, and I include myself in this, they are woeful in terms of the use of social media. They're getting better, some of them, and I think I'm getting slightly better at it. But we still do the old school, send a press release to the local paper or the national papers. Maybe it'll get a side column. Nobody's reading the newspapers. The circulation is dwindling.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting their information from TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, X, whatever platform it is. We know that. So why are we not occupying these spaces and leaving it to the people who make a living and grift out of spreading disinformation? Lots of them. And they do it because they can make money out of it. They do it because it gets them notoriety. And the second thing I'd say is we've got to, I think each of us as individuals have got a responsibility to really challenge when we're being presented information, who's that information coming from? So this TikTok thing, you kind of said it jokingly, but honestly, imagine people stopped using sun cream and we just had 30-degree heat. I mean, this is skin cancer waiting to happen, right? But people, and I remember, because I'm genuinely, I mean, somebody in my family said the same thing about that, particular sun cream brand and what it was doing, and, is this true and is it not? We've got to just stop taking random Charlies on social media. I'm sorry if your name's Charlie, but, random Charlies on social media spouting disinformation as though it's fact. And we've got to start listening to experts.
Yeah, I mean, last week one of our young people told us that these Labubu toys that are the rage are haunted and possessed. So
by the way, that might be true, right enough. I've seen these Labubu toys, but no.
that's what we're up against. But
no, it's true. I think you're in the right place here, trying to make sure you're countering that disinformation.
What made you choose SNP as your party of choice?
It's not a great question, actually. So a lot of people assume it was my dad, but it wasn't. My dad always had the philosophy that they'll find their own way. Whatever political party. I think so long as it wasn't a Tory, my dad was okay. But it was a general feeling for him that kids will make their own mind up. It really was the Iraq War for me. Was the game changer, to be honest. I wasn't born with a belief that Scotland should be independent. I was interested in it. Hadn't really done enough research into it. But I was very vehemently opposed to the Iraq War since 2003 and started uni around that time. Got involved in the anti-war movement at the time. And I remember being on a protest in London. It's one of the biggest protests that's ever taken place to date, actually. And marching against the Iraq War. And we were going past the House of Commons. And it just almost was as though a light bulb went on, or the penny dropped, to mix the metaphors, that why am I down here in London protesting against our Scottish sons and daughters being sent to a war that we're opposed to? I mean, most of Scotland was opposed to the invasion of Iraq, certainly through a number of polls that were conducted at the time. So why should our sons and daughters have to go to a war that we didn't consent? Scottish Parliament hadn't consented to go to that war, but yet our sons and daughters were coming back in body bags. So it just didn't make sense. And I thought, well, why are we not making these decisions in Scotland that are affecting the Scottish people? And so I decided to join the SNP. And the next year, I think 2004, I joined the SNP. And just absolutely have never looked back. And my belief in Scottish independence has only strengthened. I looked at the economic case, looked at the case around the social issues as well. And I think in every facet, every avenue that I explore, I think Scotland would be better off as an independent nation.
would you say that some things like the Iraq War and stuff were building? Because I remember, must have been when I was, so you said 2004. So I remember being in high school and the SNP had won the election by quite a distance here. And I remember being quite shocked because I brought up, everybody voted Labour and you were told when you can vote, you vote Labour. And that was always the kind of way, it's like your football team almost. And I always remember everybody being like, God, who is the SNP? Like, who are they? And do you think that was, at that time, was that maybe part of why the rise came? For the
Oh,
SNP?
yeah, for sure. So you're right, we won our first election in 2007, but we totally, there was a wave of kind of anti-Labour sentiment. There was a culmination of a few factors. Definitely people were very upset by the Iraq War and the decision because, look, let's be honest about it. We went to Iraq because Tony Blair wanted us to follow George Bush into the war. There was no reason. There was a dodgy intelligence, sexed up dossier. Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction that could reach here in 45 minutes. And all that rubbish that was spouted at the time was just an excuse to go and invade another country. And of course, millions of people suffered as a result, mainly Iraqis. And then, of course, others as well. So a lot of anger, rightly, about that. But then there was also just a feeling in the Scottish Parliament where Labour had been in charge for a couple of terms now. they were getting really complacent and arrogant. And by the way, every political party's got a guard against that. You know, the SNP now, almost 20 years, we've got a guard against being complacent and arrogant.
Because there's a bit of that creeping in now, isn't there?
I think every political party naturally, especially if you've been in for a period of time, there can be a bit of that kind of complacency. But it's also always been drummed into us in the SNP that we just can't allow that to happen. So if you remember, 2007, we won the election by 1 seat. Went right down to the wire. And I remember the result coming in. It actually came in the next day in the afternoon, I think, because there was a problem with the electronic counting machines. And I was lucky because I got offered a job virtually the next day. I actually didn't take it, first of all. And then Nicola Sturgeon decided to come and have a lunch with me in a kebab shop in Pollokshields and convinced me that I should take the job. I had another offer, actually. So I said no. I said no firstly, and then second time, it's fair to say Nicola Sturgeon is rather persuasive, and she bought the kebab as well. So I joined the SNP, worked for the party in the Parliament, and I'm glad that she did persuade me because I've never looked back since.
Just you talking about Nicola Sturgeon, you succeeded Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister. How big a challenge was that, and how proud were you, especially being the youngest and first Scottish Asian?
Yeah, really proud. Look, it was a huge challenge. I think, Sam, I suppose you've got two ways of looking at life. You can either look at the periods in your life and just kind of mump and moan, lots of regrets. I could say, I became First Minister. A few weeks later, my predecessor was, her husband was arrested, and then she was arrested, and God, what chance was I given? Labour were on the rise, blah, 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 blah. So you can make up all these excuses and say, be really kind of ungrateful. Or you can choose to live life the other way, which is what my preference is, which is to say, you know what, whether I had the job for a year, 5 years, 6 years, how long was Liz Truss, 40 something days, I actually got an amazing opportunity to lead the country that I love, and the only country I call home, the country that I'm raising my family in. And there's actually only if you include John Swinney, there's only 5 of us alive that have had that opportunity to do so. So wonderful opportunity, and I had amazing experiences during it. Did it end sooner than I would have liked? For sure. Would I've loved to have had longer? Definitely. But I'm really happy and grateful I got the opportunity. And I suppose to answer your question about kind of being the youngest and the first Muslim and Scottish Asian to occupy the office, I'm proud of that, and I don't think we should be ashamed of saying, when we achieve something like this, because the amount of people that come up to me afterwards who say, that day you got sworn in, and maybe you wore the traditional clothes, or you took the oath in English and in Urdu, or you did this and that represents the culture. The amount of confidence that I can give a young person, the amount of people that I've met that are young and said, or parents of young people that have said, that meant the world to us. Just as I suspect it meant a lot when Nicola became the first woman to hold the office. It gives a lot of confidence to those people. So, no, look, I'm really proud of that. Although I might change things if I could go back, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to have been the First Minister.
I was watching a lot of the kind of debates and stuff that you were having on the leadership kind of race, and they got quite heated and personal. Like, how did that affect you at all, working with kind of Kate Forbes and people like that?
Yeah, of course it did. Yeah, there's no point kind of giving you the politician answer saying, no, it didn't. Of course it did. Kate and I were good friends. Certainly friends. And obviously in the same party. And that kind of famous debate, which was the STV debate, where she got very personal, which I think actually is what lost her the election ultimately. I think she was the absolute kind of stick-on favourite when she entered the race, and then a few things happened. She kind of didn't have great responses initially to some questions, and then the STV debate. I think it's probably that moment that she lost the race, because SNP members don't really like SNP members attacking each other.
No, because it look like, because I was kind of thinking of us, like, they two rib me all the time, and I can imagine if we did that in public and it was so genuinely personal and they stuck by it, people would be looking at Jip going, they're not getting on, they're not as strong as what seems.
No, and it was really out of character for Kate, actually. And I don't know, maybe it comes out of desperation or something, because you kind of feel she didn't have the best start to the campaign, so maybe she thought, I've got to go in attack mode. But I remember when she asked that kind of particular question in that very personal way, because we'd gamed for that possibly happening. Didn't think it would happen, actually. We were kind of like, but just in case it happens, my response has got to be really calm and just factual and not attacking back personally, because one, I don't like to do that anyway, but secondly, it's not a good look for the party. So, yeah, it did get quite heated, and truthfully, yeah, it definitely did affect our relationship, which is a shame. But that sometimes is just the way it is. And that, again, if I could go into a time machine and go back, I think there's probably a conversation Kate and I could have had before things kicked off to just say, look, just got to make sure that as heated as it might get, and we had, I've lost count, was it 19 hustings or something ridiculous like that? Look, let's just make sure we stick to policies, not personalities.
What's the biggest changes you've seen in this constituency since you've took your seat?
So I love this constituency, although it's called Glasgow Pollock, although it's changing name in the next election because the boundary changes. It covers, from the south side of the constituency all the way to Deacon's Bank, which is on the boundary of East Renfrewshire, all the way through to kind of Shield Hall, Govan, and it takes in everything kind of in between in the southwest. So it's a hugely diverse constituency. Like what I love about Govan, and Govan, I have to say, has got a very special place when I moved my constituency office to here, is I don't think there's another part of my constituency that has this connected sense of community as Govan does. It doesn't mean everybody gets on in any community, but it's definitely a strong identity of being a Govanite and what it means to be in Govan, and a sense of community. Changes, look, we're not far away from the Water Road development. There's an example. You've got the bridge, of course, that connects the west here to the south. So those are some considerable changes. But actually, do you know what I noticed? One of the biggest, this is going to sound really strange, is the shop fronts. Obviously, that was done as part of some of the funding that came and invested in Govan. And you see, actually, just what a difference a clean, good shop front can make.
Our shop front was one of them.
Shop front was one of them.
Yeah.
But that makes a difference. And I've seen other centres of neighbourhoods where that's not been done, and it just looks like it's disjointed. It looks like it's not been taken care of, and it just brings down an area. So look, lots of changes. The bridge, as I say, is a big one. Water Road development is a huge one, and plenty more development to come in the future.
Is there any changes you think you would have liked to have seen in any of your?
Yeah, I think so. I think there definitely are some changes. We're having this podcast across the road from a Govan Cross shopping centre, and I think, think about another part of my constituency, Silverburn. So when you had the old Pollock shopping centre, and how that was converted, now Silverburn creates hundreds of jobs, great leisure facilities, great shopping facilities, great places to eat, kind of completely regenerated. Now, it doesn't come without its challenges. Folk that live near Silverburn will still get in touch now and again, things they're unhappy about, but generally it's been a real positive for Silverburn in that part of the constituency.
We've just put that big bowling and
Kingpin bowling. Giving Silverburn free advertising here. But yeah, that's right. So Kingpin
Are they giving us any money?
I'm sure I can phone up David Pierotti and try and get some. But so Silverburn's been really great for the constituency, and I think about Govan Cross, and look, there's no disrespect to the shops that are in there and the folk that are in there, and like I'm in and out of the bakery, probably eating too many cakes when I'm there. But we could do something better with that space.
Yeah,
I think.
I was just going to say, just before Jack kind of comes on to his next question, I mean, one of the things for us, we're doing this, we've made this look the best we can in a kind of an old kind of office space. But one of the things that we are really struggling with is space. We are struggling to get a venue for youth clubs. We're on our kind of last legs with that. If we lose the one that we're in now, I don't know where we go. And we've tried so many different things. So that's certainly, if there's any people out there with buildings or
but we should sit down about that and just try to understand what exactly you need, and maybe we can, my office can facilitate a meeting with the council as well, because one thing I hate and cannot stand is when I see a building or a premises that has been lying empty for years, and there's groups and community organisations that are ready to move into somewhere, and you know what, even if you just give them a bit of a chance, give them a bit of a, even if it's not exactly a peppercorn rent, but lower the rent if you can. Much better they're in there occupying it, doing it up. I've seen that with so many great organisations, including youth organisations, and it makes all the difference in the world. I'd rather have that in a building, and the council, if they own the property, should rather that than have a building just lying empty and dilapidated.
Yeah, the other side of that is actually making sure that the right people going to premises because
Very true.
there's places that could be used and could be used better.
The various purposes that they're used for. Yeah, agreed, 100%.
In previous episodes, we've spoken about connection and just how important they are. What can politicians do to have better connections with the people they serve?
Brilliant question. So one thing I try to do is volunteer. So I should do that. I should do a day with GYIP actually. So most recently, I think I volunteered with Starter Packs, not far from here, just
Yep.
in Harmony Road, Burley Street. So I went out with them in the van, delivered some of the starter packs, met the people that we were delivering to, because I've known starter packs for years. I think Gavin's done a brilliant job, who's there, and the team that are with him. And so I said to him, look, I've kind of met you guys over the years, but I want to understand who you're helping. Although I've met them now and again, let me just spend half a day with you, going out and about, and it was great. That's why also the best thing you can do is be in your constituency. You know, I'm here virtually every week, and get involved. Not just meeting, for example, with GYIP, not just meeting the staff. I've known John and Gina and Kevin and all these people over the years, but actually who's it they're working with. That's why I love going to the holiday camp and seeing the kids, because I'm only there for, I might only be there for half an hour, but you know, you get to know who it is you're working with and some of the challenges that presents. So that's definitely staying connected to your constituency is really, really important. I don't live, by the way. I got remarried in 2017. Almost forgot. Actually, my wife told me in 2017. My stepdaughter's real dad lives in Dundee, so I moved up there. So I travel down every week. You know, it's a journey, but I make sure I'm here virtually every week, because you've got to be connected to your constituents. Otherwise, how on earth can you represent them? And look, also the hard. Some politicians shy away from this, but you've got to also make yourself accessible. Surgeries, so I've got surgeries. People come into my office regularly, but also doing the tough public meetings can be tough, because you might be an issue that, you know, if I give you an example, it's not far from Govan. Was the old G51 parking issue. Yeah. So I mean that was a huge issue. It's not so big now, but a number of years ago, a huge issue. And we were trying to get to a resolution around that, and we get invited to public meetings. And there was an elected member, I wouldn't name his name. He said to me, "I don't think we should go, Humza. We're just going to get a battering at this meeting." I said, "Look, that's part of the job, and trust me, you'll get more of a battering for not turning up. You're better to turn up, take a bit of a battering." Right, and even though we can defend ourselves, because it's not necessarily our decision, it was council and all the rest of it. What we can do is people will respect us for coming up, and they do. So lots of things you can do, I think, but one of the best is definitely just getting your sleeves rolled up and getting involved in community organisations.
And what's your opinion on the community of Govan? Secondly, GYIP's a big part of Govan. What's your relationship with us?
Well, you guys could probably answer that. And John could probably answer that better than anybody. Look, for me, first of all, I'm not allowed to have favourites, of course, in my constituency. But if I did, no, look, Govan's a very special place to me. I was just talking to John actually before we came in here, and I was mentioning that Nicola Sturgeon used to represent this part of Govan, and then the boundary changes came. So the Boundary Commission changed it and split kind of Govan into two. It was shared between by that. There was an MSP called Joanne Lamont and Nicola at the time. And then I took over from Joanne Lamont. I won the election to this seat in 2016. I remember Nicola sent me down, and we always had a good relationship, Nicola and I. She was dead serious, kind of looked at me, said to me, "You better take care of Govan." She pointed her finger at you, "You better take care of Govan. Those people are very special to me." I said, no, I definitely will. I said, you know, really special to me too. And it's a really special community. One of my favourite kind of days in the calendar, though I wasn't able to come this year, because I wasn't here, is the Govan Fair, and you know, the open top parade and the bus top parade, and the kids who win the cup, of course, very famous GYIP Cup. It's wonderful. Who won this year?
It was St Saviour's Boys.
Creighton Girls.
Creighton Girls, very good. So, you know, and they have a great time there as well. So, Govan community, in terms of GYIP, look, I've always been a big supporter. I've always valued the work. I did youth work myself, and I benefited from youth work myself in the south side of Glasgow. It really helped me over the years as well, so I see huge value in it. So no, I've always respected and loved what you've done.
Nicola was always quite, she was always very frequent at our surgeries, and I remember the Riverside Hall one day we were over for breakfast, and it was myself, our old boss Stuart, and a guy they called Tommy the Commie, who was our secretary, who you'll
I
know
know
yourself.
Tommy the Commie, yep.
And obviously she's First Minister and everybody's saying, oh, hi Nicola, how you doing, blah, blah, blah. But no, she was right over to Tommy. Oh, Tommy, how you doing? And Tommy's kind of giving her a bit, but she's just, oh, Tommy, I know. But, and I loved that because she was quite genuine, and I've always kind of liked that of her, whether you agree with her on certain things or whatever. I always liked that. She was always quite, and that's good. She made sure you looked after.
Yes, she did. Well, yeah, and I think that's it. I think people can tell whether you're sincere or whether you're putting it on and just try to shake hands and kiss babies and take photos, or actually whether you're genuine. And I hope Nicola showed that. I think Alex was very much like that. I hope I was able to demonstrate I was like that. I think generally it's drummed into us from the SNP to make sure we don't lose our roots and who we're representing.
Just a disclaimer before I ask this question, we must be impartial but are open to give a platform on this issue. Our previous guest, Ross Galbraith's organisation, was responsible for shipping 1 million care packages in 2023 to 2024 for people in Gaza, particularly those displaced from their homes in Palestine. I know the conflict in Gaza is something you've been very vocal about and have a personal link to. Can you tell people who maybe don't know what happened?
Yeah, well, I'm just gonna pick up on the kind of impartial point, if you don't mind. And I know you've got to do your disclaimers, but I'm going to be really blunt. When a genocide is going on, and if you don't agree with it being a genocide, at the very least we can agree that there's a starvation of people taking place, because you can't deny the images. You definitely can't be impartial, and I mean that generally as an individual, not politically. You've got to be partial. You've got to be against the suffering and mass suffering of people, and that would be the same if they were Israeli, Palestinian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, agnostic, Governite, Gorbals. A child is a child. And I think that is what upsets me the most about what's happening, is that we rightly as a country, United Kingdom, Scotland, and more so the Western world, responded well, I think, when Ukraine was attacked by Russia. We opened up our homes, we took Ukrainian refugees, right thing to do. Supported Ukraine, because it wasn't their fault they got invaded, by a much bigger, more powerful military force. But look at the difference in response from the governments, and even some people, but the governments, to what's happening to the people of Gaza, because they've been dehumanized over decades. So in terms of the situation, my kind of own personal interest in it, although I've followed the plight of the Palestinian people all my life, my wife Nadia's father is from Gaza and still had a lot of family in Gaza. Now, just to break down that point, the family wasn't originally from Gaza. They were from a town called Julis, which was not part of, it was currently not part of the boundaries of Gaza. In 1948, her grandmother, who's still alive, by the way, 95 years old, she was in her teens. She was told to leave the house and that she'd be able to come back in 2 weeks. 77 years on, she's never been able to go back. So 700,000 people were taken from their homes. I just want you to think about that for a minute. Imagine more than the whole of Govan. 700,000 people. Imagine on a smaller scale, everybody in Govan was forced out of their homes and told to go over that bridge and go into the West End, or go into the Gorbals, or go into Pollock Shields, or whatever. Just forcibly removed. And by the way, actually the West End's not the example, because they were told to go from Gaza, from their towns into a place that was not very well developed in Gaza at all. And then, of course, Gaza, fast forward decades and decades, Gaza then becomes under siege from the Israeli authorities, so they control what goes in, what goes out. And it's the biggest man-made prison and the most densely populated man-made prison in the world, with 2 million people in this tiny strip of land that could fit between Glasgow and Edinburgh. It's a tiny strip of land, 2 million people, all concentrated. And then terrible events of October 7th happened, and we can all agree how horrendous those attacks were. No justification for kidnapping children and killing civilians. We can all agree. No ifs, no buts, no maybes about it. What you then get is the most horrendous retaliation, which doesn't care whether you're innocent or guilty. It's collective punishment for the entirety of that population. So whether you're involved or not involved, you are being not just found guilty, but executed by the Israeli authorities for being guilty collectively for that terrible crime of October the 7th. And that includes, by conservative estimates, 15,000 children. Now, I'm a father of 3 girls, and that really pains me. But you don't actually have to be a parent. It should pain every single one of us. And at least 55,000 civilians, but it'll be far higher than that once they clear the rubble. It'll be double, triple, quadruple that number one suspects. And we're now seeing, as this moment in time, the deliberate mass starvation of the entire population. And most of Nadia's family, my wife, Nadia's family, managed to get out. But some of her relatives, including her first cousin, Sally, and her 4 children and husband, are still there. And Sally's had to try to forage for grass and for leaves to feed her children. Now, John and I are both parents. You'll understand this, John. Look, when our Wayne has a cold, think how helpless you feel.
Mm-hmm.
Now think about holding your Wayne and they're turning into skin and bones. You've not eaten for 3 or 4 days. They've not eaten for 3 or 4 days. They've lost half their body weight, if not more. And some of the images coming out of there make me in no doubt whatsoever that what we're witnessing is the world's first live stream genocide. And the fact, and I'll end on this point, the fact that the UK government can still sell weapons to Israel, can still train IDF soldiers, the Israeli Defence Force soldiers, and doesn't recognise the plight of the Palestinian people, to me makes me deeply ashamed of the UK government that's meant to be representing us on the global stage.
So can you tell us a wee bit more about the kind of time when your in-laws were kind of trapped and you hadn't heard? And
Yeah, so that was really probably the most difficult 4 weeks of our lives, my wife and I, if I'm honest. I was First Minister at the time. And my mother-in-law and father-in-law went to Gaza to go visit Nadia's gran, who I mentioned, was in her 90s. And I think she'd caught COVID a couple of months before, and they thought she was pretty frail and she might not live. My goodness, she's one hell of a fighter. She recovered. But they didn't want to kind of not see her again. So they managed to get into Gaza, which was not easy. And then we woke up on October the 7th, 2023, and the phone's usually charged on my side of the bed, because where the chargers are, and I just looked to see what the time was. And Nadia had something like 17, 18 messages from her mum. I couldn't see what they were. It's just got number 18 and, her mum. And I thought, gosh, that's unusual. So Nadia, better check your phone. Your mum's messaging and missed calls and everything. So then, of course, we saw the videos and the images mum had sent. And I'm First Minister, and I've got to have this really difficult conversation, if I'm honest, with my wife, which is, well, first of all, we're trying to get her mum and dad out, but we're told borders closed, sealed, ain't nobody getting out. But I have to have this quite difficult conversation with Nadia to say, look, I'm obviously going to go out and condemn what Hamas have done, because there's no way that you can justify, as I say, the killing of civilians, particularly the kidnapping of children and so on and so forth. And I said to her, look, if I do that, there's every possibility, I don't know, but there's every possibility that Hamas might take retaliation on your parents who are there. And we have to understand what the implication of that will be. So, we decided we've got to speak about it. We've got to say about my in-laws being there. And so did that. I think the attack, if I remember correctly, took place on the Saturday. And then on the Monday, I kind of made a more public statement to that effect. And it was tough. Every hour of the day, my wife was glued to 24/7 news. There was many moments where she thought her parents had been killed. I'll never forget some of the phone calls where mother-in-law phoned me. It was the day before I was meant to make my first ever conference speech as party leader. She phoned it, I think it was 1 or 2 in the morning. And she just said, look, I'm phoning to say goodbye. And I said, I can't phone Nadia, but I need you to promise me. Sorry, I'm getting a bit emotional. She said, you need to promise me that you'll take care of my girls for me. And I said, of course I'll take care of them, but you're not going anywhere. Don't worry, what's happening. What happened was the house next door to them had been told to evacuate. So they were just wandering the streets waiting for a airstrike to hit the house, and just everybody would be killed in a kind of mile radius of that blast. So we eventually, they survived, and we eventually got them out 4 weeks later. And I have to be honest with you, my mother-in-law and father-in-law are not the same people.
How could you be?
No, they're racked with the trauma of what they saw, and I don't think they'll ever be the same people again. So, and they were, I say, only there. Obviously, 4 weeks is a long time. They were there for 4 weeks. Think about those people who've endured 21 months of this hell.
I mean, just going back to obviously Sam's kind of disclaimer, just for us, we obviously can't publicly put what we all think and things like that, just to avoid any backlash from anybody listening that might want to target a small, because we've had it before where things have been accidentally liked, and so that's it. But I mean, the stuff we talk about every day, politics is always on your. I never thought me, Sam, and Ethan would be having political chats in the office, but we are all the time. But the things you're seeing in Gaza is just, as the youth workers, it's terrible to see.
Well, I think that's it. I think it's just you don't really have to be geopolitical, or you don't have to understand the intricacies of the Middle East conflict or the history of the Middle East to understand that when a child is, and it's not just children. I mean, innocent men or women shouldn't be starving to death either. There's so many horrendous cases. This young girl, Hind Rajab, 5 years old, her car was peppered with 335 bullets, died slowly. When the ambulance came to try to help her, but they were too late. The ambulance was also shot at. 15 healthcare workers were not just executed by Israel, but were then buried in shallow graves alongside the ambulance and the health vehicles that they had. 2-year-old Laila Al-Khatib shot in the head, sniped by a sniper while eating dessert rice pudding with her grandparents. These are not accidents, and 1,000 people have been killed just queuing for aid. So the Israelis have got this new aid mechanism, which is not an aid mechanism at all. It's just a way of slaughtering people. So we're at this point. I think maybe a tipping point, maybe beginning to turn in the last couple of days because of the scenes and images that are coming out, and that's why press are so important. Free press is really important. And international journalists are banned from Gaza, and that alone tells a story. Why would you ban international journalists if you've got nothing to hide? But some people are getting some images out. Those brave journalists that are in Gaza and live in Gaza, getting photographs out. I think that's what's beginning to prick the world's conscience. So we've seen, I think, even in the last kind of 40 hours, a bit of the tide turning. Let's hope it turns sooner rather than later for the sake of all those who are starving.
I actually, in the kind of lead up to listening to having you on, I listened to the podcast Leading.
Yep.
It's Alistair Campbell.
Yep. Oh, sure.
How did you get on with Alistair when you did you tell him about the Iraq War?
No, I did. We mentioned it. In fairness, I think he brought it up. But look, I'm not going to apologise. Human beings are all very complex, and I don't know enough about Alistair's own kind of psyche around the Iraq War. I've heard him talk a little bit about it afterwards. I suspect he's probably got regret around how that was handled. Whether he's got regret around the decision, I don't actually know. But no, I was pretty clear. The Iraq War was a mistake. It was based on dodgy intelligence, sexed up dossiers. He had a hand in that. And yeah, I mean, I can't forgive that decision. I think it was a dreadful decision that led to, as I say, millions of people suffering.
So on that podcast, you had briefly kind of mentioned about, or they had asked you the question about your own kind of mental health struggles you've had. We obviously, as youth workers, we've experienced that with our young people. Is there any kind of message you would send out to young boys with what you've done to kind of young men, should I say, for what you've done to kind of combat this when you're going through a hard time? Yeah,
look, first of all, I think I'd say it's okay not to be okay. And by the way, you don't have to have a reason for it. It's not like your girlfriend has to break up with you, or your parents get divorced, or you find the school tough. There doesn't actually have to be a reason. Sometimes there can just be a dark cloud that you can find really hard to shift. And the worst thing you can do is not talk to somebody about it. And that's why GYIP is so important. But even if you're not part of a youth organisation, your family is your best friend, a helpline, the worst thing you can do is bottle it up. We had a really tragic case in the constituency of a young boy who killed himself, jumped off the bridge onto the motorway. And I remember speaking to his family, and they were saying, honestly, we had not a single clue that something was wrong.
Yeah.
Like, he was happy, go lucky, he was, playing football, playing with PlayStation with his mates. You just had no idea he was suffering.
Yeah, I think that was there was that boy. I think Ethan done some stuff with family and friends after that, because I think the school. I won't mention the school, but the school were offered support from Sam H. Afterwards for their pupils, and they knocked it back, which is
It's a strange thing to do, because and then that family. I apologise, I didn't realise that Ethan had worked, so I don't want to make it more difficult for Ethan or anybody else. But we often come across that, and we know the levels of suicide amongst men are disproportionately high. And look, for me, I spoke about it openly and speak about it openly because I think it is important not to stigmatise mental health. At one point I was arguably in the most powerful political office in Scotland, but I had to take care of my mental health, and I had to take measures to protect my mental health, whether that was online, making sure that certain things were blocked or muted, only saw certain notifications, but also in the day-to-day, making sure that I spoke to people, my wife primarily, but also not leaving counselling to crisis point. Now, there's a big debate and legitimate even criticism about how long it takes to get access to counselling services, including in schools and so on. So I think that's a very legitimate question and critique towards us in the SNP and the government. But there's been a lot more investment in mental health recently, and I think that's really important. But yeah, look, the message I would say to anybody, it doesn't matter what your background is, people that are billionaires, and yet people that are on benefits in the spectrum all the way through. Doesn't matter what your background, race, nationality, religion is, everybody's got mental health. And if you're not taking care of your mental health and investing in your mental health, especially when things begin to falter, then it can go horribly wrong.
There's a great video that kind of sums it up, and we've watched it a few times in the office, and it's the black dog.
Very good.
And it's a guy talking about this black dog that follows him, and he's there, and
that's very
and
good.
there's about how he ends up kind of training the black dog to be his friend, and that sums it up. So if anybody's kind of looking for something, there's a wee.
I just think we've got to normalise it. Like, so so I turned 40 this year. And I know what you're thinking. How can such a dashing young man be 40? Actually, most people think the opposite. How the hell are you only 40? So I'm starting to do a little bit more to take care of my physical health, right? So why is it we think we've got to train our physical health, but basically not do anything with our mental health until it's totally crashed, right? Until we've got a crisis point. And that's what happened to me. Actually, I had a real crisis point in 2016. Lots of different things going on in life, and basically just had a breakdown. And I left it till crisis point. And I was going to go down the kind of medicinal route. I had somebody who was a friend of mine, psychiatrist, and said, look, you'll need this. But then he said, actually, wait a minute. Before I put you on all these medicines, best thing for you is go speak to someone. And I can recommend you somebody. And, went down that route, and it was the best thing I've ever done.
So 2016, you would have been transport. So how was that juggling? What's going on? And
so really hard, and this is the stigma point. I never told Nicola Sturgeon, who was the First Minister at the time, I was going through this, because I was worried she would think I'm not up for the job.
Right.
And that's the kind of stigma we're still facing, aren't we? People saying, well, it doesn't matter what your job is, where you work. Well, if my boss finds out, my line manager finds out I've got mental health issues, they might think less of me. They might not employ me, might not give me the promotion, all that kind of stuff. So I never spoke to Nicola about it, who was First Minister at the time. And yeah, transport was never a quiet job. There was always winter pressures. The trains weren't performing as best as we would like, as good as we would have liked. There was always something going on. Transport's one of those ones where there's every day there's a challenge to try to face down. So I wish I had been up front and taken a bit of time even out if I had to say to Nicola. And she would have been great about it, by the way. This is no commentary on Nicola. If I've told her about it, I'm sure she would have understood very well. But I wish actually I'd been upfront about it, taken a bit of time out, and really focused on my mental health. And look, things got better for me, but every day you've got to just make sure you're checking in with yourself.
Well, that shows do you in your position sees the most pressing that affects us young people in particular?
So I think the most pressing issue is still in Scotland, our levels of poverty are far too high. For a country of our wealth, in 2025, we've got far too many people, and you must see this in the programmes that you do, that are still, not able to get some of the basics that we'd assume people in 2025 should have. 3 hot meals a day would be just the kind of basic, but not everybody's getting that. And there's things we can do to try to challenge that. So we've got free school meals for P1 to P5, and we're going to extend that and so on. So things we'll try to do to combat it, but the levels of poverty generally. And look, we'll obviously make the point that a lot of that is down to the economic pressure coming from Westminster, but that's not going to help people to put food on the table. So that's where the SNP government, Scottish Government, we've always got to make that our kind of number one priority, is try to tackle poverty for young people. Second thing I worry about with young people, and I'm saying this, I've got a daughter who's 16, I've got 3 daughters, 16, 6 and 1. For the 16-year-old and the 6-year-old, to a point, I have to say, I worry about the impact of social media on young people's mental health. I think you guys must see how much bullying goes on, revenge porn, all these things that go on, coercion that goes on social media, really worries me. If I got the chance and got the kind of genie out of the bottle to offer me to go back to being a 16-year-old, I'd say no thanks. No thanks at all.
I wouldn't thank you to be a teenager nowadays.
No. I wouldn't want to be one either. So I think that's a big one. And then I'm really worried about the fact that in Scotland we've still not sufficiently tackled drugs and drugs death issue and substance abuse. And that's a tough one. It's a hard one for the SNP because we have been in power now for almost 2 decades, and the situation's not got better, and not significantly better. So there's some work that we've got to do in that regard. And generally speaking, the cost of living, which is linked to poverty, is still, I think, still affecting our young people.
See, on the drug topic, I mean, what we find when we are talking about it is it's so normalised now, though. When I was in high school, you would maybe hear of a couple of people maybe smoking a joint or maybe taking a eckie out in the town or whatever, but everybody's doing it now. I mean, there's young people that attend our clubs. No Jack, by the way, in case his mum's watching. I don't mean Jack. But there's other young people that will openly tell us about their drug use, and it's so open, and it's not just a line, it's not just a joint, it's ket, and it's...
When I was in high school, a vape was like the rarest thing you could see it. There wasn't really
And
even vapes when I was.
Well,
I'm not even,
me.
I'm not even much older than them.
And even alcohol. My 6-year-old, this is a couple of years back, so maybe 14, maybe even 13. And, she has a phone, and, rules on the phone, and we get to check the phone if you want, and all that kind of stuff. So my wife was checking, one of our friends, was messaging about necking down a whole bottle of wine and this, that, and the other, 13. And we kind of said to her, like, this really, this person you want to really be befriending. And she said, everybody's doing it. That's totally normal. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And to me, that was like, and again, I'm not a prude, I understand the world, but to that be normalised at 13, that's not a good, healthy indicator for where we are as a society.
I think if you were to come into your drop-in and sit without anybody knowing you were there and maybe listen to some of the conversations that they have in private, and even how open they are to us with some things, you would be like, this is a crazy time.
No, I agree. I probably see a fraction of it with my own children, but worry about it. And then I said that you can just the whole kind of social media bullying side of it.
Yeah, and what you're saying about like social media and people being on it. I mean, my 6, nearly 7-year-old, she'll be 7 on Sunday. But say happy birthday, Isabella.
Happy birthday, Isabella.
So she's YouTube daft, and see, trying to get her to realise that the videos she's watching aren't real. It's like she'll argue with me, and then I'll watch a video about, I don't know, say politics, and she's like, see, that's not true. I was like, well, you're probably right as well. It's quite difficult getting that line. They don't have that line between what's real and what's just for content.
Yeah, I think also there's a difference. I think I'm older than you, right?
Yeah. I'm definitely not going to be 40. He would like to think I'm turning 40 this year, but I'm only going to be 35.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I'm considerably older than you, right? But I think probably still, if you were too far off ages, when we left school, so if we were suffering bullying, which is horrible,
yep,
in person, you could to a point leave it at the school gates.
Yeah.
But the difference is, I suppose, the phone
With
is
you
with you
all
in
the
your
time.
bedroom.
Yeah.
It's with you all the time. You just can't escape it. So yeah, no, like, there's a long answer to your question. But I do think, Jack, those are probably the most pressing issues. But you guys will be even more aware of what the pressing issues are. Maybe.
What can politicians do to support local organisations such as ourselves in tackling these issues we've been speaking about?
I think the main thing is to listen to you guys. I think, it's not for politicians to say, look, this is what the solution should be for you and impose it top down. We should be listening to you and you saying, look, we need more youth clubs, we need better premises, we need funding for this, that and the other. And I think generally speaking, we've had over the years, I've had a good relationship with GYIP. We've had a good relationship with elected politicians from across the political parties. You guys are apolitical, obviously, so you work with everybody and all elected members. And so you've got a really good reputation. So I think listening is the first thing, then investing in the preventative. So not just saying, look, we've got to invest in, the aftermath because of the outcomes that are poor, but actually preventing some of these outcomes from taking place in the first place. But yeah, it's a difficult financial picture. There's no getting away from it. And the finances are tight. Often third sector can feel the pinch.
What's brought on your decision to stand down at the next Holyrood election?
It was probably one of the easiest decisions I've made, which is maybe surprising to hear, because a few reasons. One is I'll have done 15 years by that point, and eventually I just turned 40, so I'll still be 40 next year when I stand down as being an MSP. It's a good kind of age and a good time to have done politics. I never wanted it to be a lifelong career, particularly because I got elected and I was in my mid-20s. I was never going to be there till I was 65, 70. So it's a good period of time to have done it. And not like I'm some kind of older kind of statesman or anything like that, but it's also important for people that have been there for a period of time to make way for the next generation to come through. Otherwise, how on earth will they get opportunity? Secondly, once you've done the top job, truthfully, it is slightly more difficult to kind of take a step back entirely. I mean, like the backbench has got its advantages for sure. But I do think once you've done the top job, you kind of think, okay, maybe I can use those skills in a different way outside of the parliamentary chamber.
It's funny hearing you saying that you're it's an easy decision, because I mentioned to you before, and I think I've said to these guys, I watched Mary Black's documentary.
Yeah.
And it was interesting just how fed up of Westminster she was, and how that the toll it took on her.
Yeah.
I would actually like to get her on if she's.
I'll speak to Mary.
That'd be great. That'd be great if we could get Mary on. But it just seems to be such a draining job, and particularly I think for her, you mentioned earlier about her being a woman and the speech she done about the sexist comments she's had and derogatory. It was just crazy.
Yeah, completely. And I'm sad. The news today is that Mary's left the SNP, which is really sad to me, because I remember when she joined the SNP, and I'd love to have her back in the party. But the challenge. So I'm not fed up. That's not the reason I'm leaving. Definitely not fed up. I really enjoy politics and Scottish politics. I think the environment in Scotland's better than the environment down in Westminster. You're not away from your family. I go home every day. I'm in Parliament. I can't remember last time I stayed over, so I very rarely stay over. Whereas sometimes you can be down there for 4 days away from your family. There's cheap bars and you can quickly spiral. This is not what I'm saying about Mary, but
I
for
think
other MPs, you can.
She did mention that. She mentions in the documentary about how much she was drinking. She was she was like, oh, I've got an hour before that, I'll go and have a drink. And she was doing speeches at like 2 in the morning.
Yeah, it's that kind of culture. So I think we're different here in Scotland. For me, it's just absolutely the right time. There's no kind of ifs, buts, maybes. I'm at exactly the right point in life as well. And look, although I'm still obviously a backbench MSP, I'm still working hard. It is a less busy pace of life, which has meant that I can spend a lot more time with my kids. And they've really valued it, and I've really valued it. For the first time in my kids' life, I went to a sports day. I did the dad's race, came second, unfortunately. For the first time in my life, I went to a parents' evening. I haven't been to any of my kids' parents, my 16-year-old's parents' evenings before. I managed to get to a parents' evening. And these may seem like really mundane, small things, but to me and to them, particularly a sports day, it meant a lot to my wee 6-year-old was buzzing when her dad was there at a sports day, and I was buzzing to be there as well. So these wee things can just make a difference. And so getting a different pace of life for at least a period would be nice.
Well, you used to be second when I play at badminton.
Oh, fighting talk. I hope we bring the cameras to this badminton game.
This has been 10 years in the making.
Yeah, but the biggest grudge match, I think, in the bigger than the Rangers Celtic rivalry is Humza and John in the badminton club.
Humza, you've been really generous with your time. Thanks so much for being on. Last quick question. If you could sum up, your near 20 years in politics in a word, what would you say and why?
If I can cheat and do two words, but it's one phrase, is public service. I think that's got to be at the heart, and you've got to try to remember that. That would be my advice to any kind of budding politician out there: is do it because you want to serve the public. So public service has got to be at the heart of what you're doing.
Brilliant, Humza.
We almost got through the whole podcast.
Nearly.
Almost through the whole podcast.
Humza, thanks again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Pleasure's been mine. Thank you so much. And listen, whether I'm elected or not elected, GYIP has always got my support and my admiration.
Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You need to edit out his Humza.
I can't believe it. That's just the programming, isn't it? Programmed that in my head.